Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm here to talk to you about the Poison War series. This is one of my favourite currently releasing fantasy series out there, and I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about this and the sequel. This is gonna go here to be in the background. Before we begin, I just want to say I bought book one, City of Lies, myself with my hard-earned cash, but I was sent a review copy of the sequel, Hollow Empire, which comes out at the end of November. Regardless, all opinions are my own, nobody's paying me to talk about books. I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible. These are fantasy mystery novels, so spoiling things is not a good idea. But obviously I am going to be talking about two books in the same series, so if you want to go in completely blind, please click away now. This is an epic fantasy series. Book one released in July of 2018, apparently. It feels much longer ago than that, but I will trust Goodreads for now. The sequel, Hollow Empire, releases November 26th here in the UK. I did do some digging as to whether this is a duology or if there are plans for more books. All I could find was that the original sale for the UK rights was for 2 books, so maybe this is everything, but I really want more books, so I'm gonna make this and try and manifest more books in this series into the world. Sam Hawke is an Australian author, and as far as I can tell, these 2 books are her only published books at this point in time. I'm pretty sure she trained as a lawyer, which, given the amount of debating and politics in this series, makes sense. City of Lies follows 2 point-of-view characters, Joven and his sister, Kalina. Joven is the friend to the heir to the Chancellor of the city of Solastra, but it's more than that. Secretly, Joven is in training to become the proofer, or poison taster, for when his friend ascends to his chancellorship, so it'll be Joven's job to keep his friend safe from poisoning. When the chancellor is killed, do I need to tell you how, Joven has to take on his new role a bit more quickly than he thought he might have had to, with the added problem that the city, which up until now has been a place of peace and prosperity, is under siege, but they don't really know why, or by whom. Kalina and Joven work in different ways throughout this book to solve the various mysteries at play. They're just trying to save the Chancellor and the city and themselves. I won't go too much into the plot of book 2 because, as I say, I think it would spoil some of the plot of book 1, but suffice to say, it's a similar theme and vibe to book 1 of fantasy mystery. It also still takes place in the city of Solastra. Speaking of the setting, I really love this setting. I definitely picked up on it more in my second reading of City of Lies this year, but I really love the idea of this city that places huge amounts of value in the arts, in theatre, in painting, in teaching those things. It's a really interesting look at what peace looks like in this context, and I think one thing that this book does really well is look at the privilege tied to that. From one perspective, Solastra is an absolute paradise, a wonderful place to be, and our characters have to confront that that might not necessarily be the only perspective available. I think when you consider some of the parallels to the real world in terms of the unlawful claiming of indigenous land, that has even more impact. I don't know if that was an intentional parallel Sam Hawke was trying to draw as an Australian author, but it was certainly something that you could definitely draw out of this book. What I think Sam Hawke does really well is keeping a balance of there are some good things about this. It isn't just your entire life has been a lie, everything's been terrible for everyone but you. She recognises that there are some good things about this society. It's just revealing some of the negatives as well. It's a tricky balance to strike, but I think she definitely gets it right. I remember when I first started reading City of Lies, beginning of this year, I think, I thought I would get really bored of the Joven character, and I was really pleased to discover that the book was dual POV and we got this female perspective as well with Kalina. I adore Kalina as a character. I actually came round to Joven a lot more in book 2. I think there's some elements that come into book 2 that you get to reveal a lot more of his personality and a lot more of his internal struggle. It opens up his characterization a lot more, so gold star for that. In the book, Joven is described as having a lot of tendencies that you could probably draw parallels between that and OCD, so counting, pacing, ritualistic things. Obviously it's never spelled out as this is a character with OCD, but you can definitely see the parallels. Likewise, Kalina is portrayed as a character with chronic illness, and that's something that's also explored throughout the 2 books. Obviously, I can't speak to those representations with any kind of authority or particular wisdom, but what I will say is that I really felt like this is an aspect of a fully fledged character. This isn't their entire characterization is their chronic illness or their OCD. I also thought it was really nice to read a book where you had two siblings who understand those things about each other and aren't actively trying to change them or to stop the character with chronic illness from doing things. There's an element of, I care about you and I want you to be safe, but there's also a huge amount of respect for what that character actually needs. For the most part, these two are very caring and encouraging of one another, particularly in book 2, and it's some good stuff. The plot is probably the biggest selling point for these books for me. It is masterfully written fantasy mystery, which is everything I've ever wanted in the world. You want those gasping as the penny drops and you realise who has been at fault the whole time. This series has them in spades. I'm so impressed that Sam Hawke manages to carry so many different threads of conflict in this entire series, but also when it all comes together, it's so immensely satisfying, and it's that thing of, this is a total surprise, but also, I now can't see any other way this all could have come together. I was a bit concerned at the start of book 2 that this was going to feel like a much smaller story than book 1, but oh boy, I was wrong, it develops quite quickly. Things to keep in mind: give yourself some time to read this series. The chapters are very long. It alternates between Joven and Kalina, and they are long chapters. They take a little bit of a while to get through. This isn't a book that I think you could read if you had 8 other books on the go and you were just picking it up and reading a few pages at a time. It needs your focus. I think you will get the most out of this story if you save it for a time where you can really dig in and enjoy. The other thing to keep in mind is, obviously this is a book featuring poisonings, and in book 2 in particular there's quite a lot of violence. As ever, if you want to know if something specific comes up in a book or if there's a particular chapter you might want to avoid, you can get in contact with me and I will look it up for you. Some comparisons for you, some other things to add to your TBR. I definitely think there's some Brandon Sanderson-iness to this, particularly those penny drop moments. I think, in my experience of the Brandon Sanderson that I have read, the biggest comparison I can draw is Elantris, because of that city focus. I think that's something to maybe read. I know some people really don't like Elantris. I thought it was pretty okay. How long has it been since I brought up the Bone Shard Daughter as a comparison? But I kind of want to bring in the Bone Shard Daughter purely from a sense of that there is something rotten in the state of Denmark kind of feeling. Bone Shard Daughter, also any chance to talk about the Bone Shard Daughter, to be honest. And a bit of a wild card, I was thinking again about cities and how important the city is to this book and how it's basically its own character. Maybe you want to read The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. It's a very different book to this book, but it's also really good, so you should go and read it. Should you go and read these books? Absolutely, I really do think so. Both of them got 5 stars from me, which, given how many 5 stars I've given this year, is pretty impressive. I think these are some of the most satisfying fantasy reads for people who love mystery, which I absolutely do. All of the above. Worth noting, I actually picked up the audiobook for City of Lies when I reread it, re-listened to it, however you want to word it, and I thought it was really good. They have a different narrator for Joven and Kalina. I thought it was pretty good, so if that's something you're interested in, I would recommend it. The other thing I will say before I go is that if you don't have the time to reread City of Lies, I think it is 100% worth doing by audiobook or by reading it. But if you don't have time, don't worry, book 2 opens in such a way that you get the gist of the plot of book 1, enough of a refresh that you can probably go ahead and read book 2 and be fine. As I say, I really want there to be more books in the series. I feel like I could read another 10 books featuring Joven and Kalina, which, me wanting to read more books with a male main character? How often does that happen? But alternatively, I just want more books that have this fantasy mystery vibe, and if you can drop your recommendations in the comments below, that would be great, while I continue to try and manifest a book 3 into the world. While you're doing that commenting, you can also follow me on all of my social media, that's linked in the description below. You can subscribe, it makes me feel loved and appreciated. Thank you so much for watching, that's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm here to talk to you. The Poison War is an epic fantasy series that started release. Do we need to be barking right now, sir? I do not think so.